Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Shape. This week I have with me a man who needs no introduction, and yet I will introduce him anyway. This here is Matt Sherman, and amongst all of the other things he does for the company, he's been one of the foremost people working on our components, which is the topic for our episode today. So I know that you have not stopped working on components for a day since we gave people an overview a few months ago. Can you give people an overview of the different types that we're going to have, which we did last time, just to recap, and then tell us what you've been working on since?
Sure. So there's pretty much 9 main types of components that go into a ship. What we're working on now that we're hoping to get in the next couple months is what we're considering a V0 rollout, which is the power plants, shield generators, and coolers for the ships, because that's really what it drives all the functionality. If you don't have power, if you don't have shields, if you don't have cooling, everything overheats and you explode.
Not good.
No. So the big thing has been getting those new components set up, mapping it out against all of our old ships to make sure that everything's going to go in right, be able to work, and that we really don't miss a beat where once we roll this out, your Aurora is going to keep flying the same, your Hornet will be the same, and then you just keep going with the game, but now with a whole new and updated set of tuning data.
So all of these exciting V0 changes,
yes,
I know what they are, but can you explain to the players on a day-to-day basis how that's going to change their gameplay?
Yeah, so the biggest thing you guys will have to look forward to is actually moving from one-offs of a lot of these components to multiples. So a 300 series is going to have 3 power plants in everything except the 350R versus just a single one. And what that's really meant to do is give you a lot more tuning options. So how these power plants will be set up, we'll have racing tuned ones, stealth tuned ones, military tuned ones, commercial grade ones, and all of those parameters together will really change the characteristic of that component. So like a stealth power plant is going to have a really low IR signature, really good heat throughput on it, so it doesn't show up on a radar, but it may not have as much output of raw power. But it's a lot more just hopefully compelling choices that you get to make to really tune and style the ship to the kind of gameplay that you're after.
So lots of cool talk about customization.
Yep.
So help us imagine we're there right now. Help us get in those shoes. Tell us about some of the cool or unique combinations that people could choose for their components to really customize their ship.
Yeah, so kind of like what I was talking about with the power plants, how we'll have the different styles. Right. So everything has just a set number of parameters that really define what its function is. So a power plant, besides its health value, it's got a power output, how much cooling it can handle, a dampening factor for if you're taking distortion damage to mitigate that to your ship. And so we have a baseline for all of these values that we're considering a C grade, and all the tuning is really hinging around that C grade. So if something's weaker or stronger, it's all relative to what is the C grade value for that size. So like a power plant, a small power plant at a C grade is 1,000 power output per second.
Right.
So taking that into the 300i I mentioned, so you're looking at a baseline of 3,000 power. But now if you install stealth generator or stealth power plants on that, you're looking at probably having 2,400 total power, because those are going to have their power output reduced, but the signature you're actually going to be creating to other players' radar is going to be much less, because that's what those things are built for. They're IR and electromagnetic multipliers that really ramp up how much another player or a radar can see you, gets really compressed, and so much harder to track those targets versus something like what we have planned for the Aurora CL, which is our hauler version of the Aurora. That thing has a pair of industrial power plants in it, so it has just power to burn, but it's going to just glow like a Christmas tree on someone's radar. So it's really about having those interesting trade-offs and spanning that across all the actual parameters. So when a player goes to their workbench or to actually tune this component, it's also very easy to see, okay, I've got this power plant, this is its base grade, this is what all of its parameters are graded at, and so you should instantly be able to know, okay, this is the kind of output I'll be getting from this component when I put it in my ship.
So it's like having different builds for the same ship.
Exactly.
Cool, great. So I know you mentioned earlier V0 is only going to have a few different component types. I know for those component types, we've already gone through and determined where on all of the live ships those components are going to live.
Exactly.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how that's going to go, any patterns that we might see, design decisions that were involved in that placement?
So for a lot of our current flight-ready ships, there won't be that big of a change because a lot of it is just taking these pieces and giving them a home inside the ship. For this V0 rollout, a lot of those parts are actually going to be hidden and just invisible because a lot of our ships weren't built with our new standard sizes in place. So it's part of the process where we lock something in, so we'll have to do an update pass. But the logical placement, though, across the ships is still something that we really wanted to make sure we got in place right away. The biggest thing with that is what components we need to prioritize for being accessible to a player.
Right.
So right away, like your life support system. In any of our ships, we want to make sure if you only have access to one component, that you do have access to the life support because if you've taken damage, if something's happened, you don't want to suffocate and die in space. It's just not a pleasant experience. And so, like on the 300, I was working a lot with Patrick on getting these placed where it's just finding that right spot where, okay, this is an important enough component. We've got this wall panel here. What can we do with this wall panel? But then also sort of mapping out what kind of changes we may need to make. So, just plotting out where everything is going to live. The bigger thing that's helped with this is also going into a lot of our new ships. So as we get the Constellation online, now having these standard sizes and stuff for all the components, we're really making sure that it's like, oh no, everything that you need to interact with on Constellation is going to be tangible, is going to be real. You'll be pulling out the panels to access your power plants, and it's really just going to make the ships a lot more alive overall. So that's a big goal for it.
Cool. Well, I think that is it for today. So thank you so much, Matt, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
And thank you guys for tuning in. Back to you, Ben and Sandy.